Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to Friday Roundup Live. First off, apologies for that little mix up there. I forgot to add something to the streams. I need to do it very, very quickly, so I left it to right at the end of the countdown. Hope everyone is well in chat. Got a few bits to go over today. Going to try and keep this stream a little bit shorter today because I'm going out with family in a bit, so don't want to be missing anything important, but don't want to be rambling on a little bit too much. We will go over the Practice 1 and Practice 2 results, some of the talking points which have kind of bailed together in one segment, if that makes sense, because not an awful lot really happened in FP2 apart from long running. There really wasn't that much to get excited about. Also, the latest on the Haas story, in my opinion, on that, their protest with Force India. And on top of that, I'll also go over a couple of other stories as well. Yes, so I think what we'll do is we will jump in and get the formalities out of the way. We'll come to you guys for some opinions in chat later and maybe some questions as well if we've got time. But we'll get the formalities out of the way by having a look at the FP1 result. What I will say as well, by the way, seeing as it is the last Friday roundup of the season and the last Friday practice sessions of the season, I'm going to try and cram as many cliches for a typical Friday stream into this one as possible. But starting off with FP1, remember this is not a very representative session. That's the first one straight in there. Of course, one of the least representative of the season. On a serious note, obviously it's run in the afternoon or early afternoon rather than in the evening. So really it was a big fat stinking test session this morning. But Max Verstappen did top it, half a second clear of teammate Daniel Ricciardo, with Valtteri Bottas nearly a second back in third place, and Hamilton was over a second back in fourth place. But like I say, don't read too much into these. Here's another one. It is only Friday. Esteban Ocon in fifth place for Force India. Says it all. 1.6. Kevin Magnussen 1.7 off in sixth place. Good morning. Actually, good day for Haas, to be fair. Kimi Raikkonen in seventh place, with Vettel in eighth. Once again, pretty much throughout Friday, Ferrari not really delivering the pace that we expect from them, but they seemed pretty downbeat after the sessions, but I'm sure they've been downbeat all season after Friday, so I shouldn't read too much into that at all. Carlos Sainz in ninth, and Romain Grosjean did round out the top 10. Pierre Gasly came home, if you like, in 11th place, was Nico Hülkenberg in 12th. Perez 13th for Force India, and Hartley in 14th for Toro Rosso. Lance Stroll 15th. Antonio Giovinazzi, big shout out for him, 16th place, 3/10 quicker than teammate Marcus Ericsson. Yes, I know it's Friday and you can't read too much into the times. We don't know what programs they were on, but he still did it, 3/10 quicker. And as I said, was it possibly Wednesday to Dan, I think I said, that the more I see of Giovinazzi in an F1 car, the more he impresses me. So I'm hoping he's going to be pretty solid next year. Stoffel Van Dorn was 18th for McLaren. Fernando Alonso, his last ever weekend in Formula 1, potentially, in 19th. And Robert Kubica, 20th. More on him in just a moment. We will have a look at the FP2 result, and then I'll get into the talking points. We can get all these bits out of the way. This is the more boring part of the stream, if you like. Valtteri Bottas, though, just 4/100ths quicker, or 44 thousandths if you prefer it that way, than Max Verstappen. So looking at the afternoon pace, it does look as though Red Bull, dare I throw another cliche in, are in the mix. Obviously, that's probably going to change when we get to tomorrow and qualifying, when Ferrari and Mercedes turn up their engine modes, their better qualifying engine modes. So they're probably not going to be in for pole, but I tell you what, talk about it in a minute. On tyres, they look very, very good. Daniel Ricciardo third, Lewis Hamilton fourth, only 2/10 off the fastest time by his teammate. Kimi Raikkonen fifth, and Vettel sixth, 3/10 of a second between the top six. Yes, please, that will do very nicely to finish the season off with. Romain Grosjean, again, a strong afternoon for him. 7th place in that Haas. They do look good. They do look good, the Haas. Nico Hülkenberg in 8th, Kevin Magnussen 9th, and Esteban Ocon does round out the top 10, a driver who this weekend is going to be pretty desperate to prove a point, I feel. Pierre Gasly, 11th place again for Toro Rosso, so consistent for Pierre out there today. Carlos Sainz 12th, Fernando Alonso much better. I can't believe that. Fernando Alonso better, 13th, but you know what I mean. Much better than the morning session. Sergio Perez 14th, Charles Leclerc 15th, Brendan Hartley 16th, Marcus Ericsson down in 17th, Stoffel Van Dorn 18th, then it's both the Williams boys, Lance Stroll 19th, and Sergei Sorokin in 20th place. So, couple of bits to talk about from FP2. I'll probably just throw them all in together, to be honest, because like I said, there wasn't a lot in FP2, but as I said there, the times from FP1, not really representative at all because it runs during the heat of the day, and qualifying the race are a lot later and then run into the evening and tonight, of course, so can't really read too much into it. FP2 is definitely the most representative of the weekend, though, so those times, they got me quite excited. But like I said, the first session just felt very much like a test session. We saw Ferrari running new parts to a front wing, sort of a 2019 spec. Obviously, they can't run the actual 2019 wing because it doesn't conform to the current regulations, but they did test parts of it, so that's probably why they're a little bit off in the morning in terms of pace. But there were many teams running sensors and new parts. I think Toro Rosso, I believe, were running some changes to their diffuser. And there were a couple of others trying things out as well. I think I saw aero paint on Giovinazzi. So sensors on the Red Bull, sensors on the Ferraris. It was kind of, I think I described it on Twitter as a pre-post season test. A pre-post season test, something like that. It wasn't really much, but it was interesting to see what they've got planned for next year and sort of get a little pace from that. But you can't read too much into it until probably now February, to be fair. But Hamilton did run the number 1 on his car this morning as well. Got FIA permission for that one instead of his official 44, but he was still officially listed as number 44. I think it was a little bit of a celebration of Mercedes winning the constructors and him winning that 5th driver's title, of course. But there was a few people there were a few people confused about this. He can run the number 1 because, of course, he is the reigning world champion, not just the newly crowned world champion. He is the reigning world champion. So he could have run that all season, but he ran it this morning in a bit of a celebration. Went back to that for FP2. I will stick with Mercedes and Hamilton, actually. We'll do it all in one chunk. They did spend the morning, FP1 session, checking the data for Hamilton's engine before deciding whether or not to change it and take a penalty, because obviously, as I covered in the debrief for Brazil, there was concern that the engine could imminently fail. And according to the BBC, I'm going to read the quote from Andrew Benson. He says, Mercedes say the issue in Brazil, which saw him very close to an engine failure, was caused by a failure in the variable inlet system, and that caused unstable combustion. So as mentioned last week, of course, he was close to that engine failure during the race, and there was talk prior to this weekend that he might need to take a penalty. At time of streaming, I don't know if he's had a penalty for that just yet or whether he's going to take an engine penalty, but I'll keep an eye on that. So make sure if you're interested, you follow me over on Twitter and I'll keep you updated over there. Hamilton was also summoned to the stewards for crossing the white line separating the pit entry and the track during FP1. Now, he had to go after FP2. Again, there's no word of a penalty at time of streaming, but I would suspect that's going to be a slap on the wrist, a reprimand, and probably at worst, and maybe a fine. So I don't expect any grid penalties for that. Of course, the same thing he was investigated for after Germany. So, make of that what you will. So whether they give him a penalty or not, we'll see. But I don't think they will. They don't tend to have to practice. It's usually a reprimand and a fine. We will talk about Williams because Robert Kubica was a little off the pace in the morning session. First of all, bear in mind he's not really driven this season apart from in a couple of sessions, but they were testing a lot of things out in FP1. So Williams did sort of put a disclaimer out quite early in the session not to expect any particularly fast times from Kubica. Having said that, he wasn't a million miles away from Lance Stroll, but a lot of today was preparation for 2019 for Bobbert. And Claire Williams just basically quoted that it was a very different programme to Lance. So can't read too much into it. I know a few people were very quick to, oh, look, here's Kubica taking Sirotkin's seat and look how far off the pace he is. I think sometimes people, when they're on Twitter, and you know what Twitter is like. You know what the comment section here on YouTube is like. Sometimes people need to look at the bigger picture and realise that you can't read anything into what happens on a Friday, because we'd have a very different looking championship if we did. So there we go. But I think he'll be okay, Robert Kubica. So we'll get some opinions on him a little bit later from chat, really, because I didn't get to talk about him on Wednesday as much as I'd like to. Marcus Ericsson had a spin out in turn 1 and clipped the wall. I say clipped the wall, hit it heftily enough to damage the front wing. That was in FP1, but no real harm done. Got a back front wing replacement, and then off he went. But in terms of tyres, there's some interesting stuff here that's going to concern the race more than anything else and could actually determine strategy in tomorrow's qualifying session, of course. We didn't hear an awful lot about them in FP1, but in all fairness, Abu Dhabi isn't generally all that rough on tyres, if that makes sense. It's not a very abrasive surface. But Max Verstappen did report that his front right tyre had given up. That was on the Hypersofts, and that was on a run of more than 10 laps, which, to be honest, I don't think is too bad on the Hypersoft tyres. We've seen this year them die after 5 or 6 laps, so I don't think 10 laps plus is too bad on them, but obviously they're going to want to run them longer in the race. But in FP2, there was a lot more complaining from drivers about tyres going off and graining, obviously on the longer runs, race strategy and things like that. But Ferrari and Mercedes in particular really were suffering, not to the levels that we've seen at times this season. Austria springs to mind, but they were struggling in FP2, whereas Red Bull looked to be very kind on their tyres in comparison. So, as I was saying a little bit earlier on, they'll be likely to struggle to land pole position once Mercedes and Ferrari crank up their engines. Yes, Red Bull, of course, have that extra mode from Renault, but it's nowhere near the same level as Mercedes and Ferrari. But once they crank that up, they're probably going to miss out on pole position. But in the race, if they can be 5th and 6th at worst, maybe get themselves in the mix in qualifying somewhere, maybe pick off a Ferrari or a Mercedes, they're going to be sitting very pretty. So although Abu Dhabi tends to throw up a bit of a snooze fest for the end of the season, we might actually get quite an interesting race come Sunday. I'm going to knock on wood so that I don't jinx it too much, but we could get quite an interesting race on Sunday if those strategies play out the way it looks at the moment. Still a long way to go this weekend though, and Daniel Ricciardo still needs to get through Saturday without any kind of engine problem. There's another Friday cliche for you. Who else have we got then? Carlos Sainz, he had a late spin at turn 18, I believe it was, and he tapped the barrier with his rear wing. No real damage done there. But the big talking point from both sessions was the sausage curb. I wish they'd come up with a better word for it than a sausage curb down at turn 20. So some of the drivers have been using it almost like, I think Ted Kravitz said, banking. So kind of helping to sort of balance the car through the corner, and it looked really impressive. Those that were nailing it. Others, Max Verstappen nailed it, Andy got it wrong and ended up riding the curb, but those that got it right, it looked really, really impressive. But there were reports that the curb was breaking up. It did look on TV like paint, but Charlie Whiting did have a look after FP1 and passed it as fit for FP2. But it did continue to get ground down throughout the evening session. So the big question is, and brace yourself for a big sausage curb question, will it be there for FP3? Obviously, we're going to find out tomorrow, but I would expect it will be looked at again. Apparently, the paddock gossip, if you like, is that the teams and the drivers would like it gone. I wonder why. They'd like it gone because obviously they're not able to run wide and gain any time through that corner. The FIA would like to keep it because obviously it's acting as a deterrent, but safety will come first, and we don't want cars flying over there and breaking suspensions, as we saw with Verstappen in Austin, of course, and we don't want that breaking down throughout the sessions as well and potentially leading to punches with concrete on the track and things like that. So I would be surprised if it's not looked at again. But equally, knowing through history how stubborn the FIA can be, I will also be surprised if it's removed. So that's probably one to keep an eye on. Last thing though, Gasly, he pitted late on in FP1, I believe it was, with smoke pouring out the back of his car. It was later confirmed that he had suffered an oil line leak and therefore had to have a gearbox change. But it's a penalty-free gearbox change because it wasn't his race gearbox. How many times did I say gearbox there in 2 sentences? About 4, I think. So yes, there we go. One more thing from practice. I'm going to have a mouthful of some water, though, before I get to that point. There we go. Sky likes to call them the long run averages, and that's what I tend to call them, but these are not long runs. But here are your averages for the top 5, if you like. Max Verstappen over 8 laps on the Hypersoft tyres was a 143.9. Lewis Hamilton over 3 laps, not really long runs at all, but on the Hypersoft tyres, was a 143.3. Bottas was a 144.1, 5 laps on the Hypersoft tyres. Kimi Raikkonen on a 3-lap run, same as Hamilton, 144.6, so quite a way off actually, surprisingly. He was, of course, also on the Hypersoft tyres. And Sebastian Vettel, the slowest of all on the Hypersoft tyres over those long runs, 4 laps. I'm going to say long runs in quotes again, a 145.1. So Ferrari, maybe not sandbagging, as we've talked about quite a lot this year. Maybe they've got a little bit more pace in their showing, but I will admit Raikkonen and particularly Vettel were very downbeat after FP2, so it doesn't look like the raw pace is there, but as we've said all season, it is only Friday. And as we've seen a million times this year, Ferrari are often off the pace on a Friday and then turn up on Saturday and surprise us all with pace. So that is it really for the FP1 and FP2 roundups. If there's anything I missed, you can ask me about it in a few minutes. We'll get some questions from you guys on it all, and we'll go over the session if I've missed anything. But I do want to talk about Haas. A couple of news stories, but I need to start with Haas. Yesterday, they launched an official protest against both the Force India cars. Now, at this point of streaming, there is no official word on what this is about. But according to reports that came out yesterday from Auto Motor und Sport over in Germany, and then confirmed by Ted Kravitz today at Sky, and some other reports have come out since as well, the short of it is that Haas are unhappy that Racing Point are using the Force India chassis and thus are not officially running a car that has been built by themselves, if that makes sense. It does all boil down to money and column 1 payments, which I'll get to in a moment, but this is the sort of crux of it, if you like. And I'm going to go with Racing Point for the new Force India and Force India for the old Force India, so I don't get too cross-eyed. But the Racing Point chassis is known as the VJM, I want to say 11, but I'm probably completely wrong on that. So let me know if it's a bit later than that, but VJM something, so VJ Malia, therefore it's not their chassis, and is entered into the championship for both teams under that name. So it's the same chassis that Force India were running, and it's the same chassis that Racing Point are running. So thank you very much, Addy. It is 11 and a few others as well confirming that's the VGM 11. Got something right, come on. So it is the same chassis being run by both the Force India teams, effectively. So you can kind of see what they're saying. I'm going to give my opinion on this because it's really awkward, because I get their point, but at the same time, I think it's really petty, but I'll get to that in a second. The official stuff, though, the stewards met this morning with those involved for an extensive hearing, 2 extensive hearings. The first one was adjourned until later on in the day, and then after the second hearing, the FIA released a statement which read as follows. They said, a substantial amount of written evidence was submitted and each party made extensive verbal representation. That's what their statement said. The stewards are deliberating on the matter. It is anticipated that a decision will not be handed down any earlier than just prior to free practice 3. So we will not hear anything likely until tomorrow afternoon. Tomorrow morning UK time, won't it? What time? Yeah, it will be tomorrow morning, about 10 a.m-ish, I think, FP3 is. So we should hear tomorrow morning UK time, afternoon, over in Abu Dhabi, and obviously different times wherever you are in the world. So we should hear something tomorrow, basically, is what I'm saying. Haas boss Gunther Steiner refused to comment on the matter when quizzed by Sky Sports F1, but during today's team press conference, Force India's Otmar Safnauer did say that the team did not expect the process. I'm going to read his quote here. He said, we weren't expecting it really. It was a bit of a surprise. In a way, it's good that all the information can now be presented to the stewards. And I think in due course, they'll make a very informed decision. So he was willing to comment, but very PR and PC and trying to keep everybody happy in that kind of situation. Which in fairness makes sense, but I'm not that kind of guy, so I'm not going to keep everyone happy. I'm going to come to you guys. I can see it in chat already. I'm going to come to you guys in a bit for your opinions on all this. But for me, as I've already said, it's all a little bit petty. If I use my rules head for a second and I look at it just in black and white, yeah, Racing Point are using Force India's chassis. So I can kind of see Haas's argument. But it's the same team of engineers, the same team of mechanics, etc., or what, 400 of them that were still at that are at Racing Point that were at Force India. So although Racing Point didn't build the chassis, the boys that work for Force India did, that now work for Racing Point. Anyone else going cross-eyed? I'm almost there. So Racing Point didn't design the car, but the staff, if you like, just under a different name, did. But then at the same time, you could quite easily argue that about a number of teams that have been taken over on the grid in the past. But as I'll get to in a moment, for me, this is a very different situation to say a team buying it's like a team buying a bus team out in the winter would be different to somebody doing it mid-season. So like when, quick example, Honda announced that they were taking control of BAR for 2006 towards the end of 2005. That's a very different situation to the Haas situation. But I'll get onto that in a minute. But it all boils down to money. This is where it's all coming down to. It's not necessarily about, can we try and get these points off them? Can we get them thrown out the championship? It's not that. It's all about these column 1 payments. Haas did not get anything for their first few seasons in Formula 1 from column 1 because they were a new team. So their argument is, and I get this, I completely get this, why should Racing Point get it if we didn't get it? But as I just said, to me, the situations are not completely different, but they're different enough. As in, Haas were a brand spanking new team built from the ground up. They didn't buy another team out, so they didn't have the option to take another chassis. They entered a couple of years after submitting an application. Force India went bust mid-season and were saved. It's a completely different story. Yes, the rules in F1 are often quite black and white. We saw that in Brazil with the weighbridge, that they have to follow that rule set, so that's the way they work, and you can understand why. It just avoids loopholes. But it's supposed to avoid loopholes. It's the FIA. Of course it doesn't avoid loopholes. But I just see it as a different situation. The problem is, as I say, it's really awkward because I totally get what Haas are trying to say, but I just think it's very messy and it's really, really petty, particularly from a team whose chassis is built by Dallara and their engine, the gearbox and the suspension is supplied by Ferrari. And yes, before anybody starts, I can already hear the comments coming, oh, well, technically, what they're doing is within the regulations. Absolutely, it is within the regulations. They are completely allowed to buy all of those parts. If it wasn't within the regulations, they would have been thrown out back in Australia. So, yes, that's fine. What they're doing, the chassis from Dallara or Dallara's help or whatever, whichever way you want to look at it, the engine, gearbox, suspension for Ferrari is all totally above board. The rest of it they have to do themselves. But they haven't built the car themselves. And I'm not going to criticise Haas on that. The point I'm making is a little bit hypocritical in some ways and a little bit rich energy, if you like, but a little bit rich coming from Force India that they're attacking other teams for not building their own cars. But like I say, I'm not going to attack them on this. Because if you go back to, I think it was just after Australia, I did a video called Haas Investigation Shifting the Focus that went down really well on the channel. And I applauded Haas for the way they entered the sport, the cost-effective way they entered the sport. And by cost-effective, I mean in F1 terms. F1 in no way is cost-effective. But in terms of F1, they did it really well. The agreement they got with Ferrari, it worked. And had Team Lotus, as they were at the time, HRT, Virgin, when they entered the sport, if they'd all have gone down that same route, they may still be here. Although, to be fair to them, they were sold on false Bernie Ecclestone promises. But we'll get onto that maybe another day, maybe a discussion for the winter. But it's a clever way that they came into the sport, so I won't attack them on that. But you can't criticise others for not building their own car when you haven't built your own. That's just how I see it. It's a little bit rich, like I say, a bit petty. Racing Point also have been using that car since Belgium. And I would wager that all of this went through some very serious scrutineering with lawyers and the FIA and everyone involved when Force India were bought out. I do not believe Lawrence Stroll for a second went into this blind. He will have made sure everything was in place. So I'd imagine this has all been covered and is all absolutely fine. What I will end this little bit on is, let's not forget, back in Australia, Force India were kicking right off at Haas and the arrangement they have with Ferrari and the questioning of how fair and how right that partnership is. So this does have an air of tit for tat to it. It does have an air of tit for tat. Maybe that's a little bit flippant for me to say that because, like I say, it's all about money and it's all about a lot of money. I have seen on Twitter, a few people have asked me this question about whether or not it's a case of them trying to get Force India disqualified from the season so that Perez and Ocon lose their results and Haas might gain points, because that's just how it would work. You throw two drivers out and maybe others get promoted. It won't be that. I can almost certainly say it will not be that. As we saw with McLaren in 2007, it will be the team that were thrown out of the championship, not the drivers, because ultimately the drivers have done nothing wrong. So to punish them would be completely unfair. So it wouldn't make any difference in that respect to results. It's more about the prize money. It's an obvious statement, but that prize money from column 1 split 9 ways is going to be better for Haas than it being split 10 ways. And I think the figure being thrown around is around $60 million. So you can, this is what I'm saying, how I'm kind of, I want to take some, I might do a video about this once it's all sorted, because I need to take a bit of time to properly think about it, because it's all just sort of coming out in the last couple of hours now. So I get it from Haas's point of view. It's a hell of a lot of money to fight over. $60 million would go a long way for a team like Haas, just like it would go a long way for a team like Force India. So I get that. When you look at the black and white in the rules, Racing Point are not running their own chassis. The team built it. The previous team built it and they took it, and all those employees are still there, but it's not under their racing license, their chassis. So I get that argument, but I think it's really petty. It's a little bit rich, like I've already said, a little bit hypocritical coming from Haas, and I think maybe if this was an issue, this should have been brought up a little bit sooner. Of course, Haas were vocal when Force India were first taken over by Racing Point, but I think Haas maybe are another one that needs to look at the bigger picture and realise that we could have lost a team from the grid, and they might have had to run 3 cars next year. So maybe they might end up better off. But and we'll get to you for some opinions actually on this one before I roll on to the next news story, because it's not divided opinion. I think a lot of people seem to be along the same lines as I am, that they completely understand Haas's point of view, but they kind of have gone about it in a very messy and a little bit of a scruffy way, and it does feel a little bit petty. So I will take a couple of your comments. Just scroll back through from when I was talking rubbish and see what you're all saying. Yes, Dan, you have got a cheeky plug, by the way. I've left you in because you're going to be helping me out loads this weekend with content. I haven't told you that yet. You know some of it, but you might as well move in, mate. But let's have a look at what you guys are saying. Why not? They can only gain 60 million. Yeah. I think that's the good point, actually, to be fair. They may as well. They're not going to lose anything, are they? Well, maybe. Is it iconic that Haas means hatred in German? Or ironic? Sorry, I'll say iconic. Ironic. I have no idea. Maybe. I can't see how it directly affects Haas, so surprised they care. It's all down to this division of money, James. If Force India, or let's call them Racing Point, if Racing Point are thrown out of the championship, then the column 1 prize money, they won't get any of that, so it gets divided between 9 teams rather than the 10, so they end up $60 million better off. So it makes sense from their point of view, but it's silly. It's not silly, it's just a mess. It could have come earlier, and it didn't have to be done right on a Thursday. Always RM says, money, it's so funny. Absolutely, you nearly got me singing then. What is the issue with Haas and Force India? How much money is it? Metal Gear Solid Snake says it's $60 million is the reported amount that's floating around at the moment. So we don't know. Like I say, this is technically all speculation. Nobody from Haas, nobody from Force India, nobody from the FIA has said this is why we're investigating it. So we're going off what the press is saying, but it does sound like it's basically what it is. I feel like it might be short-sighted. Smaller teams should be looking out for each other off the track, says Dan. In the ideal world, that'd be brilliant, but it's money. It's all about money, unfortunately. So that's the way Formula One has always been, will always be, and that's not going to change. They can do their cost caps all they like. It's still going to boil down to money at the end of the day. So, yeah. If Racing Point Force India gets removed, then Sauber will gain a position in the standings. Good spot. I mean, Sauber might anyway this weekend, but I think everybody would, wouldn't they? Williams would go 9th, so they'd get some good prize money. I mean, everyone gets prize money now anyway because there's only 10 teams, but they get a little bit more as well. So, yeah, it could have a knock-on effect. Maybe Williams have had a word with Haas. If apparently your name is hated in German, you might as well go for it. I'm joking. But, yeah, you just don't know, do you, what's going on behind the scenes. I'll take a couple more. I think we're all kind of almost... It's rare on the F1 word. I'm sure there'll be people in the comment section getting ready to comment right now to attack me on it, but most of you seem to be on the same page as me, that you get what Haas are saying, but it's all a little bit messy. And I think whoever it was, I've forgotten your name, I'm sorry, said, what have they got to lose? So it does definitely make a lot of sense in that respect. I like what Jonty's Corner said earlier, a compromise seeing both Haas and Racing Point Force India excluded from the championship. It's an option. I say throw Force India out, don't let them race this weekend, then tell Haas they've got to run a 3rd car. See how they feel about that. Jack says 60 million is worth fighting for, in my opinion. That's where I'm kind of torn, to be honest, mate. It's a lot of money, isn't it? I'd kill for a 10th of that. It's even less. I'd take a tenner right now. But yeah, so Ferrari 2.0, it's a team... Eat Team World, especially in F1. That's a good comment to leave it on, actually, for this part. Very well said. That's it. It's dog-eat-dog in F1, isn't it? So let's have a look then. The other couple of stories I wanted to go over very quickly before I disappear. Esteban Ocon. It has been confirmed that Esteban Ocon will be Mercedes' 3rd driver in 2019, as the rumours continue to swirl that he is set for similar roles at 2 other teams, and they are apparently Williams and Force India. He could be reserve driver for 3 teams. That's a guy who wants to be racing, isn't it? Toto Wolff also said that they were looking at the possibility of giving him some test sessions, possibly as early as pre-season testing in February. I'll read you his quote for those that are interested. He said, his plans are pretty clear. He is going to be pretty close to the Mercedes team. He will be our reserve driver and 3rd driver. We hope to do the odd test with him. We are looking at pre-season and in-season, but it's not sorted out yet. He will do a lot of time in the simulator to make sure that he is ready. So Ocon's got something. He's got something. It's not racy like a lot of us would like, but he's got something. But with those plans confirmed, and those rumours aside, of course, with Williams and Force India, My guess is it won't be long before we hear about Lance Stroll's move to Force India. I think that should be confirmed soon. Obviously, he's got the run in the test after the race weekend, so we all know he's going there anyway. But he said he doesn't want the announcement until Ocon's plans are all laid out. They've been laid out. So I think we should hear about Lance Stroll probably as early as Monday, if not before, to be honest. I'm just throwing dates out there. Why not? It's a laugh, isn't it? But I'm usually wrong on predictions, so probably another 6 months yet. But it should be confirmed soon. I also want to add as well, Claire Williams has confirmed that they will announce their third driver and reserve driver, quote, probably next week. She said that to Sky Sports. It is rumoured that that's going to be Esteban Ocon. There was some talk on... I'm sure it was Sky. It might have been Channel 4. I was trying to keep an eye on both coverage, but on one of the two coverages here in the UK, she was asked, it must have been Sky, she was asked if there were concerns effectively over Kubica and whether they might be looking at a driver to step into races that maybe Robert Kubica doesn't feel he can do, or maybe that they're worried he can't compete in. She didn't say anything on that. She just talked about reserve driver plans, but Martin Brundle was speculating with Simon Lazenby that maybe that's the way they're going to go, bring someone like Ocon in as reserve driver, and then if they feel that Kubica couldn't handle Singapore, they'll put him in the car. But I stand by what I said on, was it Thursday the news was announced? I'll stand by what I said then. If Williams and Robert Kubica did not feel Robert Kubica was capable of racing every Grand Prix, Williams wouldn't have offered that seat and he wouldn't have taken it. So I think he'll be absolutely fine. Very quickly though, Ferrari have allowed Kimi Raikkonen, listening Red Bull, to be released early so that they can test for Sauber in the post-season tyre test in Abu Dhabi. That will allow Charles Leclerc to go and run in the Ferrari alongside Sebastian Vettel, and Antonio Giovinazzi will be joining Raikkonen in that test at Sauber as well. So basically, starting from Tuesday morning, Charles Leclerc will be at Ferrari and Kimi Raikkonen will be at Sauber. So that move's gone through a little bit sooner than we're all expecting, but that's going to be good to see. It'll be nice to see those guys in their new overalls. Earlier this week, it was also confirmed that Renault have granted an early release for Carlos Sainz to test for McLaren. But as I kind of touched on there in a cheeky little dig, Red Bull is still standing very firm in refusing to allow Daniel Ricciardo to run for Renault next week. How do you feel about that, guys? I know a few people are a little bit frustrated at that, but they did do the same with Vettel to Ferrari. So I don't know if this is petty. I don't think it's petty towards Renault. I think this is just Red Bull's philosophy. I don't know, whatever. It's just their philosophy, if you like. They're not going to send their drivers off to teams too early. So other confirmed drivers, by the way, for this test, which starts, I think it's Tuesday, next week, Tuesday and Wednesday, are Robert Kubica and George Russell for Williams. Lance Stroll will get his first Force India outing, even though he hasn't even been confirmed as a team second driver for next year. And Pierre Gasly will be joining up with Red Bull. Now, as always, you can read more on these stories over on planetf1.com, and there is a link to them in the description. Loads of good stuff over there. Now, I've got a list here of cliches I wanted to include in the stream. Let's quickly do this before I get some of your questions. Red Bull might right in the mix with Mercedes, Ferrari nowhere. That was one cliche. We did that one. This FP1 session is not really representative of the conditions we will see in qualifying of the race itself. That's the second one. I definitely got that one in. Ferrari looked to be sandbagging. Definitely said that. Red Bull looking strong, but will that be the case when Mercedes and Ferrari turn their engines up in qualifying? I did get that one. Daniel Ricciardo looks to have a problem. His session is over. Not quite, because he didn't have a problem, but I did have a little dig on his engine, I guess. So I'll have half a point for that one. And can Max Verstappen become the youngest pole sitter tomorrow? I did not include that one, so that's a shame. But I got a few there in, a few of the cliches that I get a lot of stick for over on social media and on here. A couple of people saying that Lewis Hamilton's got a reprimand. Let's head over to Twitter. I said reprimand, did I? Or did I say... No, I said reprimand and possibly a fine, but I will have a look. I'd imagine a reprimand would be fair for that. Did he get the reprimand after Germany? Not sure. I can't see it, but if it's not been confirmed, I imagine that's probably the route they're going to go now. So, yes, a couple of your questions before I disappear, because I don't want to run for too long. Just double checking Twitter there, make sure everything's above board. Let's have a look at what you guys are saying. Who's test for Scuderia Toro Rosso alongside Fiat? We don't know. Nothing's been confirmed or anything at the moment, Kai. People saying robot. Yeah, I spotted it and I sorted it. Don't worry. Yes. Nothing confirmed yet, Kai. Hartley's still in there. Apparently, is a rumour. He's still got a chance of keeping that seat. Who else have we got that's been linked with that? See, Albon, Mick Schumacher's name starts to be floating around again. That's not going to happen, but there you go. And yeah, so probably Hartley, I'd imagine, for the test. But we shall see, because Gasly's going to be at Red Bull, of course. So you said something about making suggestions for videos like the Hamilton or Hulkenberg ones, where I'd suggest one about Helmut Marko. If you just do #January in any of the videos you watch, or at the end of this stream in the comment section, don't do it in chat because it doesn't show up, but in the comment section, and I can get to those when I do a search later on. So any questions like that in the comment section to this video or any video afterwards, then just pop #January and a question in there. Like I said in the channel update, I can't answer all of them, but I will try my best to get through as many as I can in January. So I will definitely sort that one for you. One on Helmut, maybe one on Red Bull in general, including Helmut Marko, could be interesting because there's some stuff around there that's floated around this year that might be quite interesting. Tictum can test now, I think, says Addy. 35 he's got, has he? Super license points, so he might be able to. He might be able to. He needs, for those asking, he needs 63 World Championship points this weekend, with those in the top 10 in the championship, not, or top 8 in the championship, I think it is, or something like that, not scoring any points so that he can get himself with the points he needs for next season. Not going to happen, but of course he can take part in the Winter Series, so he might still be an option for 2019. But I think the way that Red Bull are pushing him into F2 and the way that Red Bull are pushing him into a Winter Series, I would imagine it'll be Japanese Super Formula next year and then probably F1 in 2020. So not good if you're Danny Rick. Not Danny Rick, sorry, Daniel Kvyat, is it? Could be out by the end of next season already, but we'll see. Will Daniel Ricciardo ever win a title, says Elliot? No. I'll give you an answer. I don't like to say it because I love Daniel Ricciardo. Most people do. And he'd be a great world champion. I said about Eddie Irvine back in 99. He'd have been a fantastic world champion. What a character. But I can't see it at Renault. We've not got the massive rules reset that they need in 2021 to really to build a challenger in the next 5 or 6 years, to be honest. I mean, you never know. You never know. They've made some great strides forward, right? They've got to be given a lot of credit for where they've come from, Renault, because they've made progress year on year, but now they're fourth. They're fourth. I don't see them challenging for top 3 next year. 2021's not going to be a big rules reset. So the next big rules reset, according to Christian Horner, was likely to be 2023 at the earliest. Well, at that point, Daniel Ricciardo is, 33? Same age as Lewis Hamilton, and we all talk about Lewis Hamilton possibly retiring in a couple of years. So assuming that they get that right with any rules reset, he could, but I think he's going to have very limited time to do it in. So as much as I love the guy, I'm going to have to say no. At the moment, it could change, though. Yeah, so... would take a brawn for him to be the next world champion. I think maybe not to that extent, but I think he could do with a big rules reset, definitely. But then you never know. To be fair, with Renault, no. But if he has a really good season next year and the year after, and Lewis Hamilton retires, and Mercedes decide they're not going to stick with Bottas, or George Russell isn't ready, and Ocon's not really ready, or they don't want to take him, or he's been in and he's not shone, maybe they'll go after Danny Rick. And then maybe he can. But I think he either needs a rules reset or a switch to Ferrari, Mercedes, or a return to Red Bull, which is highly unlikely, but we'll see. How much of a difference would Kubica make to Williams, says Paris Precious 21. He brings experience. I know people don't like me saying experience because he's been out of F1 for 8 years, but he had his accident 2011. Was it 2011? Just going to double check. It was 2011, and he initially came back to racing a year later-ish, but just over a year later in 2012, and then he was competitive again in championships from 2013. So he's had really a couple of years without racing because of his injury, but actually he's got a hell of a lot of experience. So I think he'll bring that, and we'd be lying if we said that wasn't one of the things that has been massively missing from Williams this year. When I look at Williams, the one thing they really need is experience. And yes, they've got that behind the scenes, but that's not helping them set the car up. It's not helping them get things right over a weekend. So experience is massive, and it's really going to help Williams. But I think he's just a quick guy as well, and he's got a lot to prove, and his story is fantastic. So I think he brings a lot to Williams. I really, really do. Let's take a couple more before I disappear. I'm already overrunning, but I said half an hour, but was actually aiming for 45, so I will end in just a moment. He would demand the arse out of the mechanics. He absolutely will. Rightly so, drivers should be. But yeah, I get what you're saying. If Bottas has a similar season next year, will Mercedes put Ocon in the car for 2020? Unpopular opinion for Bottas fans, I suspect that decision's not completely made, but partially made. For Toto Wolff to be so certain that Esteban Ocon will be on the grid in 2020, something's going on. It may well be that it hinges on what kind of season he has, but I said it a couple of weeks ago and I'll stand by that. I think Bottas needs to either win the World Championship or be right in that World Championship to the last race next year to still keep his seat in 2020. Russell's in F1 next year. They want Ocon. They rate him really, really highly. So I think it's likely that Bottas will go, but we'll see. And a few asking where Bottas will go. Always RM was the first to ask it. Maybe Williams, but I think probably somewhere like Formula E, unfortunately. Just think it, so much talent coming through, so many young drivers, so many good drivers on the grid. There isn't really anywhere for him to go. So maybe maybe a team like Haas. We talked about them earlier. Maybe Haas might take them if they're not happy with Grosjean next year, or with Magnussen, that might be an option for them. Maybe Force India if Perez decides to go elsewhere. But McLaren, perhaps, if Norris or Sainz don't work out. But we'll see. We'll talk about the end of next season. Anything can happen. Bottas, we don't know. People will laugh when I say it. We don't know. He could win the championship next year and shut us all up. So there you go. He's a really nice guy, though, Bottas. I always want to see him do well. He's one of those. He reminds me of... I've forgotten his name. That's Mika Salo. Not just because he's Finnish, but I always wanted Mika Salo to do well when I was a kid. I don't know why. I think it was that gorgeous Black Arrows in 1998. But we're going to take one more question from chat. I might have to scroll back and take some from earlier on from those that were asking. See if there's anything I've not been asked before. Let's have a look. I'm sure I've spotted a couple that are quite good. Let's go with that one then. I'm going to get your name wrong, and I'm sorry, from Abo31 or Abo31. Apologies again on the name. You can call me Scene if you want, for some revenge. He says, can McLaren perform next year best of the rest? I think they'll perform. I think they'll make steps forward, but I don't think best of the rest. I fell into that trap this year. I fell into that trap in the winter that with the Renault engine, Alonso on board, the people they had, they would be able to challenge for top four. And I was pretty confident after the first few races. I thought they were solid. But their season just never really got going from there and just fell apart. So I don't think so. I think I want them to, in the same way that I want Williams to, in the same way that I want every team to be up there competing and want those classic teams back at the front of the grid. But I think 9th to 4th is a bit of a turnaround. Yes, Haas did very well this year, but McLaren don't have the ties that they have, don't have the agreements in place they have. Maybe with Red Bull ditching Renault power, McLaren will get a little bit more support from Renault, if that makes sense. So that might help them out a little bit in that respect. But it's not the engine. The engine's not great. The engine is not great at all. Renault can big it up all they want. Red Bull are right. It's not a good engine. It's not bad, but it's not a good engine in terms of power. But that chassis is pretty dire on that McLaren. By the way, can I just say, actually, before I disappear, I need to do this because I might be going absolutely crazy. I think I got rid of it, which is really annoying. But yes, I did. Damn it. But the McLaren livery this weekend with the blue, the red and the yellow for Fernando Alonso, the images they initially shared, those renders, it was the orange of the car, then blue, red, yellow, and then the orange of the car. This weekend, it might just be that it's part of the engine cover or the exhaust or something, but it seems to be blue, red, yellow, and black. And that red, yellow, and black almost looks a bit like the Belgian flag. So all of those people that were saying, has Stoffel Van Dorn got any kind of tribute on his car, either deliberately or completely by accident, he kind of has. And I know that might be me going crazy and trying to look way too much into these things, because that's just the kind of weirdo I am. But just that little black bit at the end, it's probably just part of the exhaust or something like that, but it almost looks like the Belgian flag. So you've got like a tribute to Alonso one half and then a tribute to Van Dorn with the other half. So I'm going to pretend it is, because obviously I highly rate Van Dorn, so I want him to do very well. So yes, but yeah, Neil says he thinks it's just me. I'm crackers, absolutely crackers, mate. But I'm going to leave it there because I'm going to overrun otherwise. So I need to go and get ready to go out with the family tonight for my brother-in-law's 18th birthday. Only 18, I wish I was still 18. Anyway, I will be back tomorrow for the qualifying watch along at 12:30 p.m. I believe. I don't know if John T or Dan are joining me for that one. I didn't ask. I just said to them both, if you want to, let me know and you can jump in with me. So we will see tomorrow. That's at 12:30. The qualifying report will be up by 7 p.m. UK time. We've then got the race watch along at 12:40 p.m. That starts on Sunday. Then the post-race stream as well, about 2 hours after that. So around about 4 p.m-ish, and I will be joined by Stuart and I believe Jonty for that one as well. One thing I will say, I do want to say this before I go, Monday's race debrief, I haven't decided on it. It is on the schedule, but if we have a typical snooze fest in Abu Dhabi and there's not really a lot to talk about, I'm probably not going to bother with it because they don't do very well in terms of views, and I know, and I feel such an arsehole saying that, quite frankly, because I know there are so many channels out there that struggle for views, and 10, 15k on a video would be something they'd love, but to me, for the effort that goes into it compared to other videos, it's not worth it if there's not a lot to talk about. And I don't want to repeat myself either. Everything we say in the Sunday, I'll just end up saying again in the video on Monday, so I might not do that, but I'll let you know nearer the time. It's all down to whether or not it's a decent race. If it's a good race and there's plenty to talk about like we had after Brazil, then I will do it. If there isn't, then I'm probably going to take a couple of days off and put focus on winter content and getting ready for that. So we shall see. It might be good. It looks good after today because obviously Red Bull's tyre things and whatnot, good tyre wear, so they might be right in the mix, but we'll see. But I will be back tomorrow, 12:30 p.m. UK time. In the meantime, don't forget to follow me over on Twitter, links, social media, if you like. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and to Discord are all linked in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.